Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we've got our NFL FanDuel main slate for Sunday. So before I get started, could you guys smash that like and subscribe button? Really do appreciate it. Also share the video if you like it. With that said, let's get into the players that we do like here. Starting off with Josh Allen for the Buffalo Bills. He's been pretty good this season so far, as you can tell. He's been one of the top plays. Obviously, he's super expensive, but he's in a great position here to have a good game in a against the Jets, who are kind of an average team, and I do like him in this matchup. Then we're going to look at Aaron Rodgers. Where is he? Aaron. Uh, for the Green Bay Packers against Detroit, he's just in a really good plus matchup here. He hasn't had one of those like real crisp, great games where he gets 300 plus yards and stuff. Obviously, the wide receiving core definitely is hurting him some, but overall, he's in a good spot here, and I look for him to take advantage of this at a pretty good price point where we can utilize that to pay up for some other players. But we could also look at Derek Carr against Jacksonville. He's in a pretty good spot here as well. And aside from last week against New Orleans, he's in a good spot to have a nice bounce back game, and his price point has come down quite a bit. And then finally, Kyler Murray against Seattle. Now, I don't love going up against Seattle's defense necessarily, but they haven't been all that great, and he's been really good the last couple weeks. And he's been really good all season. And he's been hitting over 300 yards a couple times, and I look for him to do that in this matchup as well. And so he looks like a really solid play. He's really starting to play well this season overall. Then we're going to look at running backs, and we got Devin Singletary. He's looking great for the Bills against the Jets, and he's going to have a pretty good game here for them to play well and win. And he's going to get some receptions and targets in this game, I think, and so he will, as well as rushing attempts, which he's been getting more rushing attempts the last couple games than he had earlier in the season. So he looks like a pretty solid play today. Mozart from Miami is also looking pretty good against Chicago, who have had some rough times against against the rush this season. And he's been inconsistent, but he's going to get 15 to 20 rush attempts and a couple of targets, and he'll have the opportunity to score a touchdown or two in this game. And this is definitely the situation where I would really like him. Then we're going to look at Josh Jacobs for Las Vegas. He looks like he's in a great spot here against the Jaguars, who haven't been particularly great this season. I mean, they have a decent defense, but they haven't been great. And he's been pretty solid the last few weeks, with the exception of one against New Orleans. He's just really tough defensively. But overall, he's got some good upside in this matchup, and I really do like him this week in general. Then we'll look at Jonathan Taylor it looks like he's actually ruled out now, so never mind him. Aaron Jones for Green Bay looks like he's in a really good spot. This is a nice plush matchup for him. He's been a little bit inconsistent this season, but in a game like this where it's really in his favor, I do like him as an option. Plus, he'll get some passes through the air as well. Then we're going to look at Ramondre Stevenson for New England. His usage is continually rising as he's the lead back now. He's also getting lots of targets through the air, which helps pad his points a little bit. And so he looks like a really good play, but he's no longer as cheap as he used to be. But he's still a good option on this particular slate. Eckler for the Chargers is a really good option this week, though he is expensive. He's been really good for 3 of the last 4 weeks with a whole bunch of touchdowns through the air and on the ground, and I look for him to continue that this week. It seems like the matchup doesn't matter all that much to him, and it's a pretty decent matchup, to be honest. And then Joe Mixon for the Cincinnati, he looks to bounce back here and have a better game than he did last week against Cleveland. He's been pretty consistent the last few games, getting close to, just 10 to 15 or so fantasy points, and I think he can do that again. Obviously, his price point has come up some, but I do like him on the slate overall. Then we're going to look at the wide receivers. We're going to start with Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp has been really solid this season. I look for him to continue that in this matchup. I don't expect him to get anything less than 20 fantasy points in this one, and he's been playing really well. Then we're looking at Tyreek Hill. It's a little bit less expensive. You good option off of him against the Bears. Obviously, the Bears are pretty good against the pass, but he's a matchup-proof type of guy, and as long as they can get him the ball, then he'll be a guy that's going to score fantasy points for you. Then we're going to look at Christian Kirk for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I do like him in this matchup, though. He's been somewhat inconsistent, but he's had a pretty tough go defensive-wise, so this is one of the better matchups he's had this season, and I look for him to break out and have a really good one here against the Raiders. Then we're going to look at Drake London Another guy for Atlanta that I like, okay. He's been inconsistent this season as well, but he is going to get some targets in this one. He'll have potential for a touchdown as well, and so I do like him from that perspective. Michael Bandy for the Chargers, another guy I like for them. He hasn't played very much yet this season. I believe it was due to injury, but because of the full strength of the team. But now that they got a couple guys out, that's going to really help him get some opportunity, and I think from what I can tell, he's going to have more opportunity here in this particular game. So we'll have to see, check back closer to the time, obviously, to make sure that he's still in play, depending on the injury situation there. Amon-Ra St. Brown looks pretty interesting this week for Detroit. He has been inconsistent, but he's going to get a lot of targets, and this is a matter of him catching a bunch of them and not getting hurt himself as well. So I do think he's in a pretty good spot and have some opportunity against Green Bay, who has had a rough season against guys like him. Justin Jefferson looks like he's in a good spot for Minnesota. I really do like him this week, especially on FanDuel. He's going to get plenty of targets and yard opportunities, and it's just a matter of him taking advantage of those against a bad defense. Then we're going to look at Curtis Samuel. Now, his problem is that he doesn't catch a lot of the targets he gets, and that's a big problem early in the season especially, but he is doing pretty good the last couple games, and I look for him to continue to get around 10 or 15 fantasy points, and this is a good matchup for him to do that again. Tyler Boyd is a guy I like for Cincinnati in this one. Cincinnati's got to bounce back here, but he's been pretty good lately, and with injuries, he's going to be one of the I think he'll be the second wide receiver for them, so I do think he's a good option. And then Adam Thielen, he's in a really good spot here for Minnesota. He's been pretty consistent this season with the exception of that game against Chicago. But this is an easier matchup here against Washington, so I look for him to have a solid game as well. For the tight ends, we're going to look at Kyle Pitts. He's probably my favorite tight end on the slate so far at this point with Atlanta. He's been inconsistent this season, but this is a good matchup. It's probably one of the better matchups he's had from a defensive perspective, so I think he's going to have opportunity to make some good plays here and potentially get a touchdown. Then we're going to look at Everett for the Chargers against Atlanta. Now, he's in a good spot, but he's been really inconsistent this season, mostly because he hasn't caught a lot of the targets in a couple of games. But if he can do that, he'll get some yards, and he definitely has touchdown potential in this game as well. And then for for the Green Bay Packers, Tonyan, sorry if I'm messing his name up. Anyway, Green Bay has a really plus matchup here, and he is going to have to be the safety valve for Aaron Rodgers. He's actually been decently consistent when it comes to total targets and receptions, with a couple exceptions up and down, but he's been pretty good this season, and while he hasn't really had too many touchdowns, I think he's only had one, he's in a pretty good spot here, and he has some upside if you want to go for a cheap tight end. For defenses, we're going to look at the Bills. First, they have a good matchup here against the Jets, and I think they're going to both take advantage and have a pretty good game overall. The Dolphins, if you want to go a little bit cheaper, you can go with them against Chicago. Chicago hasn't been very good this season, and this is a good matchup for them to have a good one. They've had some really good games this season and had a couple of bad ones, but they do have good defensive players, and I think they have a good they're cheap this week. So if you desperately need a cheap off defense, then the Dolphins are a good spot. The Vikings might be one of the best just based on, history this season so far, and they got a nice plus matchups against the Commanders, but they are a little bit cheaper, or a little bit more expensive rather than the Dolphins, so you're going to have to figure out who you can fit in with the other players you're utilizing. And of course the Bengals against Carolina. Carolina is bad, and the Bengals defense tends to be decent, and so if they can get a couple of sacks and an interception in this game, which they're definitely capable of doing, they will definitely have opportunity to pay off here at this pretty good price point overall. With that said, thank you guys for liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you have any comments or questions about tips, plays, or anything, feel free to leave those below. And in any case, have a nice day, guys.